This week, Marshall Erwin from Fastly is with us to discuss the state of cybersecurity readiness for the next big emergency. Then in the enterprise security news, agents replacing analysis is highly misunderstood. Only one funding round. Orca acquires Opus to automate remediation. OneDrive is updating to make BYOD worse. Companies are starting to regret replacing workers with AI. Is venture capital hanging on by a thread made of AI? Potential disruption in the traditional vulnerability management space. MCP is already looking like a dumpster fire from a security perspective. Malicious NPM packages, and is Alchemy real? Finally, for our last segment, we have two interviews from RSAC Conference 2025, both focused on AI-powered attacks. First, Bry Frost, PluralSight's Director of Security and IT Ops curriculum, discusses the skills you need to defend against AI threats. And then Radware CTO David Aviv discusses how companies need to adapt for AI-driven attacks. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. This episode is sponsored by Fastly, the application security leader and edge cloud platform behind many top digital experiences. Fastly helps organizations deliver and secure online experiences for their end users through a modern, developer-friendly approach to security. With their next-gen WAF, bot management, and DDoS protections, teams have the tools they need to ensure their applications and APIs perform at their best without sacrificing speed or reliability. Discover how Fastly transforms security into an enabler for digital innovation at securityweekly.com/Fastly. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Chocolate Chip Day. This is episode 407, recorded on Thursday, May 15th, 2025. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today is the Dean of Data Science, the Knight of Neurodiversity, the Watcher of Data Center Waste, Jackie McGuire. How you doing, Jackie? Out there? Outside? Living your best life.
Outside again this week. I'm fantastic. It is unseasonably habitable in Arizona for mid-May, so I'm enjoying it. It's a crazy week. We get out of school early, so next week is the last week of school here, and there's all kinds of concerts and promotion ceremonies and showcases and all of those things. So I am momming so hard this week.
Nice. Also joining us is the Prince of Paladin, the Czar of Training, Jason Wood. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm good. Doing well. Not enjoying warmer, habitable weather because we got up to the 70s and 80s, and it dropped 30 degrees on us in 2 days.
Oh, so wow.
I'm not going outside for a little bit.
Yeah, we've had a really cool May here. And it is National Chocolate Chip Day. So I looked, and there's it's funny because Tyler Shields used to be a co-host on this show and hates chocolate, does not like chocolate. And it just seemed like every time, just so many of these intros I've done, there's some kind of chocolate day. And I tried to count yesterday. I lost count once I got to 30, but there are many national days and international and global days that mention chocolate. It's kind of ridiculous. But I guess it makes sense. Most people like chocolate, except for Tyler.
It's a food group for me. So, how are you doing, Adrian? I think we always forget to ask you. How are you?
I'm doing good. I am right at the point where I think I have as much business as I can handle, which is nice, being independent. And I'm stressing a little bit over some travel coming up. I'm gonna be going to Armenia to speak at 2 different conferences, and it's I imagine similar to traveling to South Africa or Australia from where I am. It's something like 26 hours of travel with all the layovers. Yeah. So stressing a little bit about that.
Tube.
What's that?
I said, being trapped in a tube.
Oh, yeah. A lot of it is in the air. So it's not looking forward to the travel, but looking forward to the destination, and always happy to get invited to speak places. So I am excited about it. All right. This interview is sponsored by Fastly, and today we're talking about the state of cybersecurity, particularly around the software supply chain. Fastly CISO Marshall Erwin joins us today, and he has a particularly interesting point of view here, as prior to Fastly, he was the CISO or CSO and head of privacy at Mozilla for 8 years. So I imagine, welcome to the show, Marshall, and I imagine that gives you an interesting perspective on it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really looking forward to the conversation. Yeah, that's right. I think the time at Fastly, time at Mozilla, and even before that, I've looked at cybersecurity from a number of different angles. First, like just out of college from the federal government, and then in Congress, and then from tech. So, yeah, I just realized I'm almost on just hit the 20-year mark across all of that. So yeah, it gives me an interesting perspective, and I've gotten to see a lot.
Yeah, and it's I've tried to vary my experience throughout my career as well, and I find that it does help to have. I didn't realize I dug far enough back to see that you also had some government service there, some experience there. So yeah, I imagine that's very interesting too, particularly given what we're going to talk about today. That's very relevant as well. So we've had a lot of, I like to think of it as instructional failure. Like I always tell my kids, a failure is a terrible thing to waste, because we can learn so much from it. And in cybersecurity, it's the reasons that breaches occur, the details around why companies have incidents and have cybersecurity breaches is still, the attempt is there to keep it secret. But we do have details of some of these incidents, and there's a lot to learn from them. And Marshall, I'm curious about your perspective on some of these. What are some of the incidents that you think the industry could learn the most from? And I'm sure there's mainstream breaches, right? Like we see a lot of ransomware out there, but then there's kind of the black swan, the outlier breaches where maybe we only see it once, but it's really kind of scary, kind of like SolarWinds, I think, is kind of in that category.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an important point in time to have this conversation. We're really at an inflection point where we can look back on some of these major failures and say, what did we learn? Did we learn anything? So maybe as an important question to me. I do think it's important to think back on SolarWinds and also a lot of the work that the response to SolarWinds generated, and ask okay, what progress have we made? So I do think SolarWinds is probably the most important one that we should really start to think about again now, look back on. Then the other major ones I think about are SolarWinds, the Colonial pipeline piece, which I think really put ransomware much more into focus. And then obviously we're bookend that with the CrowdStrike outage. Not really a security incident, I think we would typically think about it, but nonetheless, so I think relevant to this conversation. And then Salt Typhoon as well, kind of bookends, kind of from SolarWinds to Salt Typhoon, what did we learn and what does that tell us about the progress we've made? So that's why, like I said, I think it's a good inflection point to step back, look at all of those, and think about how much progress we've made, and if we haven't made enough progress, what we should be doing about it.
Yeah, and just a few insights just off the top of my head. I think CrowdStrike is a good one to include here because it impacted availability, which a lot of ransomware events aim to do, particularly when they target third-party suppliers. And we have seen ransomware groups move from just encrypting data, and even with encrypting data, the goal has always been to impact operations, and use that as the lever to make someone pay that ransom, take away your ability to do business, to earn revenue, and make you pay to get that back. So CrowdStrike certainly did that. The cause wasn't a malicious actor, but that's still, I think there's some resilience lessons to be taken away there.
Yeah. I think there's a few other reasons that it's relevant too. It wasn't the result of some form of attack or malicious compromise, but nonetheless, it showed a systemic risk, and the EDR tools, I think, tend to be highly privileged, and therefore an outage can cause systemic risk, whether it's an operational failure or an attacker. It could have been an attacker. And then I think it's also relevant to the conversation we're going to have today about supply chain risk and how to manage supply chain risk, because you got to ask, would a really mature supply chain program have caught this? And again, whether it's an operational problem or an attacker caused problem, the systemic nature of the risk and the outages is I think, the important thing to be thinking about there.
Yeah, I think one of the difficulties here, I often advise enterprises on vulnerability management. And one of the things I see more mature vulnerability management programs and patching programs doing is automating the process. And in the case of SolarWinds and Crowdstrike, these were both software updates from a trusted third party. And the updates were trusted. They came directly from the source. There was no reason to question them. But that's often one of the number one pushbacks to fully automating patching is disruptive. Patching can break things, but at the same time, we see if the purpose or the use case of patching is preventing someone from exploiting something that patch is fixing. That's a very timely thing as well. We've seen, I think the Verizon DBIR showed it an average of 5 days for most exploits after disclosure of a vulnerability, and then 0 days before we start seeing exploitation for the kinds of exploits on devices that are exposed to the public internet.
Yeah, exactly. I think the other challenge is, again, the CrowdStrike is such an interesting example because it, they had a fairly thorough postmortem and talked about what mechanisms they had in place, what shortcomings they had that didn't catch the problem and allowed that operational challenge to occur. And I think the takeaway from that is a lot of the standards that you would expect or want them to have in place, they had in place. And obviously the system failed nonetheless. But if you said, do you have a staged deployment process for most of your agent? The answer was yes, right? Do you have thorough testing of most of your code and your product? And the answer again was yes. Well, that didn't catch the particular problem, but it does mean that vetting against this and catching it would have been extremely difficult. And I guess again raises this higher level question about what can we do in the context of a widespread outage like that, where you can't reasonably expect to identify it in a sort of supply chain vetting process.
I think one of my key takeaways from that is how fragile we all are to recovering from that kind of incident. I remember Delta's CEO was on national television talking about having to enter recovery keys on 40,000 Windows servers. And the first thing that hits me, just the architect in me and security guy in me thinks 40,000 Windows servers. That was just a nightmare waiting to happen anyway. It just happened to be CrowdStrike. But anytime you have 40,000 Windows servers, I'm thinking, could 90% of those be containers? How can we get rid of some of these Windows servers? Because that just sounds like madness to me.
Exactly. Yeah.
We have no fallback methods either. I used to work at Radio Shack, and I remember we had a method. If registers go down, we do paper tickets, but we can't do that anymore. There are no manual processes to work around software anymore, which is crazy. And I understand the security issues associated with it, but I think given the nature of kind of critical infrastructure risk we face, it's just not reasonable to not have manual processes in place and to just assume some level of connectivity will always be reestablished.
Yeah. I don't even think most places can take cash because the register drawer is controlled by that iPad that's connected to the internet. And I'm not sure if there's a local mode for that or not. So it's it's a good point, and there is kind of this, there's this link between better cyber resilience and BCPDR. And the thing about BCPDR is we've all had those plans for decades, but most companies haven't had to really use them. Or I think to the extent that we're now seeing now that malicious actors are, going about this in different ways and, targeting supply chain and things like that. I think supply chain is something we haven't thought of as much. And there's different kinds of supply chain. There's the supply chain that we choose, right? The products we buy and use. And then there's the fourth parties, Co-op in the case of I forget the supply chain partner that was taken down, but Co-op, which is a chain of grocery stores over in Europe, and I think it was particularly the ones in Sweden. The payment provider they used had a third party that impacted them. And so Co-op didn't even know about this fourth party, but it still took down their ability to keep their stores open. And then there's the just infrastructure stuff. Like, I think one of the things we're going to talk about is the MITRE CVE contract. People freaking out about that a little bit. And what I thought in that moment was, what if Let's Encrypt went away tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, all your certificates needed to be updated? Like, are you agile enough to handle that scenario? Because I don't know what it would take for Let's Encrypt for that to happen to them, because I think they have donors from different places. But I think we have to think through some of these scenarios.
I think I'd just add to this, like this series of incidents recently of like attackers, nation state actors trying to sort of slowly compromise critical libraries as well. Like that's part of the supply chain risk as well. I don't count that on the list of like the critical incidents, in part because those were found and the industry quickly responded and addressed the risk before it grew systemic. But nonetheless demonstrates the intent. And I think that should be a real concern, is like some of these sort of open source libraries used across the industry that can slowly be
I think XEUtils was like 2 years he contributed.
Exactly.
The attacker contributed meaningful work to this project. So there's a lot of patience in nation state, especially with PRC. I think they think in much longer term strategies than we do.
I had somebody put it to me one time talking about the nation state side of things, to where they don't know when they're going to get a request to go do a thing, to get information or whatnot.
Right.
So these groups are out here actively, getting into areas that are part of their mission, maintaining that access. They're not doing anything with it. They don't need to do anything with it. What they need to do is be ready, though, that when somebody comes in and says, hey, I need to find out about this, go do it. They have to be ready to respond to get the request for information complete, back to them. And so, it's, to your point, Jackie, very patient. We're going to just do this and hang out here just, in case this becomes of interest, because they've said we should focus on, I don't know, some critical infrastructure or something like that.
It's essentially the same pattern we saw with SolarWinds as well, just to like tack back to why I think that one's important to start with, and then like think through the work that was done to address those problems, because again, that's really the pattern. It was like slow, and then it was everywhere.
So Marshall, how do you think about like the trade-off between the cost of running through some of these exercises? So if I want to run through a resiliency exercise and I want to take half of my team and divert their already very precious time to do that, like how do we think through that? Like what the actual cost of running these is versus, and how to decide which ones are most important when we already have too much to do.
Yeah, that's a good. Well, when my teams have run exercises like that, I'll say like I've found them incredibly valuable, and I think my companies have found them incredibly valuable, because you learn a lot. You learn you have a set of assumptions about what the path is going to be, but you don't really know how effective your detection team is going to be until you throw something at them. And so I think everything from your sort of standard BCP exercise to your more red team offensive exercises, I've found to be incredibly valuable in my time. I would say the one caveat to that is there's a point when I think it's valuable, and there's a point when it's not necessary. So sometimes you have a good enough sense of what your risks are and what you need to buy down, and buying those down first, and then really testing out how effective you've been is the right approach. And so there's always a time for them, and running them well they're not cheap. I find, right? They can be pretty expensive exercises if you do them well. But I do think they're worthwhile on a sort of every multi-year time frame to really test out your hypothesis about your program.
What have you found that helps you get the support, to go to the business and say, hey, here's what we need to do to test this out. Here are the problems. that I'm seeing or that we're seeing, or here's the data. I mean, how do you go get the support to do that? Because like you said, this is not inexpensive. To Jackie's points, takes up time from expensive folks.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, like, when I have gone to my executives teams and asked for the resources, I have not thus far gotten the pushback. When I think when I've been able to justify why now was the right time to do it. That said, like, I think where I have found that to be most valuable is driving the subsequent resource conversation about, like, here's the gaps these things have shown, and here's the resources we need to address those. And so I haven't thus far run into, like, those exercises done well are not cheap. But I think they're easy to justify if you really think through what you're after and are doing it at the right time. But it's really driving that second stage conversation about the resources that I found to be most critical.
Yeah, so I want to pivot to talking about some of the executive orders here, and maybe pull a little bit from your government experience. And I think my first question here is, these executive orders, though, I think they're important to everybody in that, if government is thinking about zero trust, maybe I should be too. Once it reaches that point, typically our expectation is not for government to move quickly on cybersecurity trends. And then all of a sudden they started to get on top of things. But, because there's only really teeth for it, there's only enforcement for government organizations. How important do you think these executive orders and what's in them is for the larger market as a whole?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's worth, like, going one level deeper on the executive order that sort of came from SolarWinds, talk about a few, like, what it was really trying to do and what was successful and what wasn't. So I think I'd say the most important thing that it tried to do was build the actual sort of security operational capacity of the government itself. Like, prior to that, you had a lot of, like, high level cyber strategies, but, like, and at the same time you look at, but you're missing some just basics of how you, federal government, should be managing the security of your own footprint. And so what that executive order did was really, like, try to up-level the security capacity of the government itself in really good ways. I think in it, pretty basic, again, making sure that there are EDR solutions that are in place and easily available for federal government agencies, like nothing earth-shattering, but things that you think, like, yeah, of course, right? And I think that's important. It's important for the federal government to, like, I don't want to say lead by example, but at least to sort of follow the standard example, let's say. There's two other things to highlight from that executive order. One is it really did focus on software security supply chain. And what it did was try to essentially ask NIST to define a software security standard and then use the government's purchasing power to drive that standard into the industry. And so that's not just helping the federal government, it's trying to establish the standard and then by using that purchasing power, distribute it across the industry. And lastly, I'd highlight that executive order included things like the Cyber Safety Review Board, which I thought was, some of the reports they put out, not all of them, but some of them were quite good. And I was disappointed to see that it had been disbanded because I thought that was an innovation that was quite worthwhile. And I'd like to see that set up again in the future. And those were all things that I think work that was driven by that initial incident, the SolarWinds incident, and people's effort to really try to get ahead of that and think about what we should be doing to prevent an incident like that in the future.
Yeah, we learned a lot. I think we had a special episode just on the Microsoft report that CSRB came out with. And it was really impressive finding that apparently the State Department has really good cybersecurity compared to some of the other groups out there, because I forget the details of how they discovered it, but it was through email somehow. And just really, really impressed by that. But that's like the level of transparency into some of these really high level breaches that I think we need. And whether it's CSRB or a class action lawsuit makes the Mandiant investigation report public, I'm game for any way we get those kinds of details.
Yeah. The Microsoft report I thought was the best one that they put out, and it was quite useful. I had asked my team to read it because it's the precise details of what happen there are useful, but more generally thinking about like how should we get ahead of risk, and rather than let it build up with this tech debt, which I think is one of the sort of narratives in that report, I think is a useful thought experiment that I think my team benefited from.
But I thought they were really fair with it too. They thought, people are just going to think that we're bagging on Microsoft. So what we're going to do is we're going to go interview Amazon, and we're going to go interview Google, and we're going to see what's the norm for their processes. Before criticizing Microsoft, we're going to look at their peers first. And they really tried to be fair with that. And I appreciated that. So between that one executive order, which was 14,028, and the last one that came out of the Biden administration, 14,144, where did we get to, like, between those two? Like, what progress did we make? And where do you think maybe we didn't make enough progress? Or you mentioned it would be great for the CSRB to come back, but what's still missing here?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'll say on the original executive order, the piece that I think was rightly intended but ultimately did not have the impact that I think we would want is that software supply chain standard work. And I think that's just evident from all the examples we've talked about. Like, this still feels like a problem that's getting worse and not better. And the way that I think NIST in particular approached that, which was to sort of establish a new, I would say, like, fairly rote compliance regime, it just didn't make a dent in that problem like I think we would like to have. And again, that's why I think you really have to ask, would this have prevented SolarWinds? And can this sort of compliance framework be helpful in understanding and preventing a CrowdStrike outage? Can it somehow be helpful in preventing, the attacker compromising a critical library that then is distributed broadly? Like, I'm not sure that work really, we can say with confidence, would help solve any of that. Maybe that's just because it's a super hard problem. I'm not saying I have great solutions there, but I do think that the approach taken thus far has not really moved the needle as much as we would have liked it to.
Well, I do appreciate the push for zero trust, and with the conversations I'm having, it looks like companies are actually implementing it. And maybe there's nothing in there that stops SolarWinds from happening again. But if zero trust becomes kind of the standard for security architecture, that does help the customers downstream for SolarWinds, because if SolarWinds can only talk to SolarWinds, and your SolarWinds can't talk to shadyserver.ru, right? Or just some random AWS IP address, that does solve it for the customer, right? It does seem like zero trust and some of these other things that we're pushing for here, just good outbound firewall filtering, right? Good outbound controls stops so much exploitation activity, and C2 activity, the ability to download additional components and modules for malware and ransomware.
It's worth highlighting too that I think that's right, and it's worth highlighting that the federal government, and particularly that first executive order, I think played a role in popularizing zero trust. Not like super innovative work, but that was also a component of the approach that was thought to apply to the federal government, but I think more importantly, sort of popularized the concept and pushed it out a little bit more to industry.
All right. And I think most recently we saw JPMorgan Chase put out a memo. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that blog post from JPMorgan Chase's CISO, but basically saying, we need software suppliers to, raise the bar a bit. Did you have any opinions on that? I don't know if you got a chance to read it.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the sort of clarion call quality of that. Like, to me, the basic message that this risk has only increased, that like all of this effort that we just talked about largely hasn't put a dent in that. I think that's the memo is saying that in different language, but I think it's correct. I think the one challenge that I see from the memos. One, I think part of what the memo talks a little bit about is like over dependence on a small set of vendors and some consolidation in the market, creating a certain amount of risk. And I'm not sure that's right. I see the challenge that I face and many companies face from a supply chain perspective as like it being too diffuse, not that it's consolidated too much. And I think that's important because if we really do think the problem is consolidation, that lends to a different set of solutions than if it's really the problem is the diffusion of the number of vendors that we have and our inability to control that vendor space. But it's as far as like the articulation of the risk and the growing nature of that risk, I think it was spot on and right. And I think it's worth reading.
Yeah, I think without changing our economic system, I don't think there's any way to keep platforms from forming and growing. That's just the gravity of it, right? These smaller companies form bigger companies. And, I think keeping them separate is just not going to happen without some major changes there. But kind of where I want to wrap up here is the message from Secure by Design, from a lot of these executive orders, from the JPMorgan Chase blog post. They all say prioritize security over features. But I keep looking for the incentives, and I keep asking myself, what's going to make people actually do it? Because if your competitors prioritizing features over security, like the example I like to use is Dropbox. I'm a happy Dropbox customer. I think they've had something like 7 breaches or 9 breaches or something like that. Most people don't know that. It didn't really impact them that I can tell. So when we have so many examples of companies succeeding, by prioritizing features over security, and maybe it's just that none of those breaches were all that bad. Maybe they were all minor breaches, and that's why we never heard of them. But where does the incentive come from? How do we actually get people to prioritize security over features?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I do think we face a much stronger incentive today to do good security work than we have in previous years. It's just part of, anybody coming to like potential customer of Fastly or even potential vendors of Fastly. In all those cases, we're doing a high level of diligence there. So I do think the market incentive is there to do good security. It's the balancing point about feature development that I think is still tricky, because obviously the product is often going to lead. But I actually identify the challenge a little bit differently. Like, to me, the real problem is, like, how do we do supply chain security well? And like, even if we faced an incentive to do it really well, and I think we have a growing incentive to do it well, if we don't have the right solutions, well, we're not going to make a dent in it. And so that's where I think we need to make more progress. I'm less worried about the incentive, which, like I said, is stronger today than it has been in the past, at least. Mm-hmm. And more worried that we just don't know how yet to do it well, despite, like I said, a fair amount of effort that has happened in recent years to try to get ahead of that problem.
Yeah, and the government is a big customer, and if the government is enforcing it, I imagine at least some of the companies out there, it's going to make more sense for them to just set the bar at, what the government provides, than deliver a different product to the government than to the rest of the industry.
Yeah.
All right, great stuff. Marshall, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. Great chat.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Fastly, and stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to cover the Enterprise Weekly News. Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device, because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Now for the Enterprise Security Weekly News. You can check out securityweekly.com/ESW407 if you want to follow along as we go through the news, for links to the articles we're covering, or my stupid comments on the articles that we're going to be commenting. And I did, Eamon, welcome to the show.
Hey, Adrian. Glad I come to meet you. Hey, everyone. Good to see y'all.
And what I was saying is I did, both you and Jackie, the stuff that you put in the Slack, I added to the show notes as well.
Oh,
so,
cool.
Yeah, that stuff is on the table. If you want to talk about, Eamon wants to shake his fist about AI in interviews, AI use in interviews, we can do that.
Get ready for a 3-hour show, everybody.
Eamon yells at Cloud.
Yeah, somebody call Doug.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to start out with the funding, just get that out of the way because there's not a whole lot with it. So the security funded newsletter, I love their vibe check section so much that I've included in every one of our shows. And last week's question was, what trend in security is most misunderstood right now? And the overwhelming response was, agents will replace analysts. And I think that goes right along with one of our other stories here where I forget the name of the company, but basically they're bringing humans back.
Klarna.
Klarna?
Klarna.
What does Klarna do again?
They're the ones that, you can pay in easy payments right here on the website.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
right.
The financing.
They're one of those micro debt people who
micro debt, yeah.
Easy to go, yeah.
There's another one that starts with an A. After something.
Afterpay. Yeah.
Buy now, pay later service provider.
Yeah. Yeah. Afterpay, I think, is the one you're thinking of. And yeah, it's the put yourself in just a tiny bit of debt at once and you won't notice it.
It pops up everywhere. Yeah. And it does seem like the kind of place that would fire humans and use AI in their place, right? Kind of, I don't want to call it predatory, but definitely focused on margins. Very margin focused.
They're not dealing in scruples.
Yeah. I like that. That's a good quote. They're not dealing in scruples. All
APR,
right. Go ahead, Jason.
I would say APR maxes out at 36%. Yikes.
I think that's only because that's the CFPB's, like the CFPB sets a maximum.
Yeah, it's illegal any higher than that.
Yeah, so there's actually like prime plus like 25%, I think, is the maximum interest rate you can charge. So it's not because they're nice.
Those are some margins. Impressive margins.
Yeah.
So the one company, ironically or coincidentally, Katie is not here, but the company she works for, Ox Security, Israel-based software supply chain security and risk management platform. I thought they were marketing themselves as ASPM, but next time Katie's on, she can correct us on that. Raised a $60 million Series B from DTCP, which I've not heard of. Yeah, not a lot of other funding. I imagine everybody got their announcements out at RSA or before RSA. So, I'm guessing I think we typically have a dry spell between RSA and Black Hat because they're somewhat close to one another and people just save up all their announcements for Black Hat. So I think we do tend to have kind of a, it'd be interesting to talk to Mike Prevet and see if he sees a dip in funding announcements in the summer months. So acquisition, interesting one here. Orca Security acquired Opus. And Opus, we first talked about them years ago on this show. Ex-Simplify folks. And Simplify was a first-generation SOAR tool. So we were assuming it would be SOAR v2, something that would compete with Rapid7 and Tynes in that area, maybe Torque. I forget if Torque does something different, or Tray.io. But they're actually going after risk-based vulnerability management, where they're both doing prioritization of vulnerabilities, and then there is kind of a SOAR component in that they offer to automatically patch that stuff for you or remediate the vulnerabilities for you. So An interesting one. I think it's my CEO at the last startup I worked for. One of his design principles is he didn't want to tell you about things that he couldn't also fix for you. Like he didn't want to just add a bunch of noise, and it was a posture management company. And this makes sense. The deal rationale here, if you've got customers coming back to you, like, okay, you're telling us about all these problems. Like, when are you going to fix them for us? Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, it leads to a lot of fatigue, I think. So I've briefed with a handful of companies in the last few weeks who are doing not exactly the same thing, but something somewhat similar. And seems like agentic AI is the new SOAR. And so we're now bundling some of the orchestration and all of these things with SOAR type capabilities that are powered by agentic AI. So yeah, I think it's definitely one approach. We'll see how effective it is. But yeah, I think I've heard it multiple times since RSA.
I don't think generative AI and automation pairs well. I mean, just so much of the responses require a human to check them. And the moment we start talking about autonomous stuff and AI in the same breath, if it's like large language models, just the fact that they're non-deterministic, like you need predictable output, unless it's just going into a notes field or a text field or something like that. You're chaining LLM output into an API somewhere. You need that to be somewhat predictable. And we'll see.
I don't know that all the agents are supposed to be generative, and I think some of the benefit of agentic AI is being able to use a combination of LLMs and the cheaper kind of more deterministic stuff. So that's what I've been pitched a couple times, and then a company who was looking.
It just sounds like SOAR then.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think SOAR was just security automation under a different name. So yes, I think there's some LLM or SLM, like a small language model, context matching that they're doing between languages and things like that I think can be helpful. Also, not needing to clean your data ahead of time, being able to use AI to kind of intuitively match fields and things, because that's the biggest issue, right? Is that it's not having the data. It's that if you're dumping raw logs into your SIM, being able to match, geo IP location from one log to the next can be an issue to spot anomalies. So there is some of that, but again, it doesn't need to be generative. It can use like a SLM or some type of pattern matching. And that's where we're going to see the companies doing it well are going to have profit to show for it. The companies not doing it well are going to go in the heap of disillusion that gets pushed into the trough.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting for trying to building parsers, figuring out formats for things, data fields. I think that's an interesting use case for it. But yeah, generally once you use it for that once, and then you have some repetition after, like you don't want to use it every time, right? You want to use it to kind of define the field and define it, because it's very expensive to use once you do any amount of scaling. It's just stupid if you're using an LLM to do anything that's repetitious.
Yeah, I think eventually we'll probably get to a point where we can take a medium language model. And this is where I think we're going, right? Is that we have LLMs right now because we've just been trying to do
not everything needs to be a do everything chatbot, right? Not everything needs large language, super. Yeah,
and I think they'll start self-pruning essentially, although that's actually really hard to do. Once an LLM's trained, you can't really prune it once it's trained, but there's probably some feedback data we can gather and start reducing the size of the graph that needs to be traversed to answer some of the questions.
Yeah, and it seems like they're as sophisticated as they're going to get. They kind of ran into a wall there, so specialization makes a lot of sense to move into next.
Yeah, it turns out you can't create a genius AI from pretty mediocre internet.
Right.
If the internet was full of geniuses, that might be another thing, but unfortunately the internet's pretty mid.
Yeah. It's especially when you average it out, for sure. All right. Yeah, it's like the idiocracy of technology, right? Things just the more people you bring onto the internet, the dumber the average gets. And then we train on all that stuff, and there's nothing else left to train it on. Like we've literally trained it on everything that's that they could get their hands on legally and illegally. So,
I wonder if the next wave is like incentivized training. Like if you can start asking educational institutions and things like that, because the RAG training that we're doing, like, and I bitch about this all the time, right? Is that the internet's dirty, it's stupid, it's satirical, it's sarcastic, and it's really, really, really hard to figure out what is what, right? Like, so one of the things I was thinking about the other day is like, you'll take a picture and you'll be like, oh, actual photo of me doing this. And it's because it's a joke that that's not what you're doing. But how the hell does the internet know that? How does an LLM know that? And so that's, I wonder if the next, and I worry about this too, because if the next iteration of this is paid training, then we create these kind of privatized, gated pools of good knowledge and clean knowledge. And how do we preserve access to that for educational purposes, for low income communities, for disadvantaged communities? But I would guess that that's kind of the future, is because we can't get smarter on the mediocre data we've trained on. We need to start paying people for smarter data going forward. Or you can just keep stealing it from people now and develop better ways to figure out whether the people you're stealing it from are smart.
There's a lot of gatekeeping around data happened, after companies realized how valuable the data was and that people were scooping it up for free. So, that happened pretty quick. Let's see. So Jason, anything particular in here you want to jump to? I'm going to kind of go around the room here and see what you guys want to talk about before I dive into anything else.
So we mentioned this before we started recording, just talking about RunZero.
That's the one I really want to talk about. So.
Oh, good. Well, then there's two of us. Because I was really curious. I worked at Tenable for a little while, so this is something I have a little bit of background in. And I was kind of caught.
So start out with what they posted. Talk about what they posted first. So the audience
I guess that's a fair thing to say. So it looks like their post here is talking about their capabilities, essentially to, as they put it, run alongside endpoint agents. Talking about the problems that they have with traditional vulnerability scanning. How, as we were discussing, you run a scan across a network, you come back with all kinds of generic Linux hosts. They can't match what they are, even though sometimes you can look at like the response that's dumped out and see it tells you exactly what it is.
Yeah, but it's a very manual thing, right? Like analysts have to spend a lot of time on this long tail of looks like Linux.
Yeah.
Right?
And you have to poke at it. And
what is it? Is it vulnerable? Who owns it? Who do I talk to? Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing and they're talking in particular about systems we can't scan very well. They mentioned OT here in ICS as problem systems that, if we run a basic network scan, they fall over, or bad things happen. So I was interested in this in part because you've got the idea of, okay, we got EDR controlled systems. We can extract information about what's installed on them compared to what we know about vulnerabilities that are out there in different versions of software, versus these systems that we can't manage, that we can't scan. And as they're talking about, they have the ability to pull all of this together. Which is the part that caught my attention.
Yeah, let me frame this up a bit. So back in episode 401, I noticed that RunZero was now showing UCVs, right? And so far, RunZero is something I've been recommending alongside a traditional vulnerability scanner, because traditional vulnerability scanners don't correctly identify all kinds of devices. They're principally, like, they don't do a whole lot better than they did 20 years ago. They're really just worried about the servers and the workstations, right? The Windows, Mac, and Linux. And Linux being like, Ubuntu, Red Hat Enterprise Server, the stuff you'd use on workstations and servers. And
they don't do great on those unless you give them credentials.
Right. So you do authenticated scans. So H.D. Moore, who sold Metasploit to Rapid7, spent some time at Rapid7, came out of Rapid7 and built this company. And I think it was very intentional that he saw this gap and decided to go after it and decided to build this asset management tool that had a scanner built into it. And since then they have grown it into like a CASM tool. So let me see if I can remember the acronym here, a Cyber Asset Attack Surface Management platform, where they also built a whole bunch of integrations. So they can actually pull stuff from Tenable and then push stuff back to Tenable. So they can actually improve your data in like ServiceNow, Tenable IO, and other platforms. So bidirectionally improving the quality of your data in different places, filling in those blanks that you're missing. And yeah, I thought it was just a matter of time before they can kind of replace the other vulnerability scanners. And this was kind of the case with like the CrowdStrikes and SentinelOnes. For a while, they had to pitch themselves as complementary to the McAfees and the Semantics because they didn't do full disk encryption. They didn't do host-based firewall. They didn't do like all those EPP things, device control that you had to do to replace those products, because they just started with that base, either EDR or the next-gen AV technology. It took them a couple of years to get there. And so that could be happening here. And that's on episode 401. That's kind of what I was throwing out there. And I thought, man, this is a hot take that I'm suggesting that RunZero is going to go after this market. I think it very much needs to be disrupted. But I think it's even more of a hot take that they just came out and titled this blog post, "Ditch Vulnerability Scanners, Modernizing Exposure Management." And that's now what we're calling this, is exposure management. It's like this kind of heading over vulnerability. Like it includes vulnerability management, all the posture management stuff, external attack surface management. These are all exposures, and vulnerabilities are just a type of exposure. And yeah, basically saying, if you've already got an EDR, like all the EDR tools are now doing vulnerability management because they're on the host anyway. They can tell you what versions of what software is on there. Like that's all your Windows, Linux, Mac OS stuff. Like, what do you need authenticated scans for at this point? And all those vendors, CrowdStrike, I think, just included network-based scanning. They now have network-based scanning now. Windows Defender vulnerability management, I think, includes some scanning capabilities as well. And they also integrate with Intune and do a lot of stuff here. So I think they're kind of right. Between the agent-based vulnerability management stuff, you really just need better asset information, because some of the most important vulnerabilities, like when I was a pen tester, it would just be, there's a web server running in port 80, and that, it's not critical. That doesn't get a CVSS score. And I go and investigate it. I find it's some kind of device with admin on it. And like, that's how I hack into the company. Right. And, for a vulnerability scanner, it doesn't even give it a score. It's just informational. It's just, we see this port open, so
and that's,
I think they're on something.
Yeah. That is an area that needs some severe help because, like you doing pen tests, I took over, got root on a database host, inside the database system, because they had an open HTTP directory, informational, and they found PHP MyAdmin exposed to the internet, informational. What they didn't comment on was the backup of the database in that HTTP directory.
Which had clear text credentials.
Which had credentials in it. And so I just logged into PHP MyAdmin and I was off to the races. And then it kept going a few steps after that, but that was always one of the frustrations, particularly as organizations have these policies around their vulnerability scanning where we're only going to patch things that are CVSS 5 or 6 or whatever it is and above, and we're not going to care about the rest. And as we've talked about all over the place in the different shows, that context is really key.
Yeah. And also, not everything gets a CVE. Port 80 open doesn't get a CVE, which means it doesn't get a CVSS score, which means it doesn't get prioritized, and nobody does anything about it.
Yep.
So I think this is also a shift in how we think about exposures and kind of moving beyond just things with a CVE. I heard CVE is blowing up and going away anyway, right? it's
that might come up.
Defunded, canceled. Yeah, I just read a Google report the other day. So this is a project I've been working on. I've been thinking about like how many CVEs out of these 25,000, 40,000 that are registered every year actually do bad stuff to companies or result in bad stuff to companies. And Google actually did that work. They came out with a report. They said, and it goes back like at least 10 years or something like that. This may have come out of Mandiant. It's unclear to me now with them combined, like which group it's coming out of, but it's less than 100 every year. It's 70 something, 90 something, I think was the highest number I saw. That's the number of CVEs you actually need to care about. So with that context, yeah, I mean, it's making a strong case that, maybe vulnerability management programs shouldn't be so centric around these kind of aging vulnerability scanners.
Could this be the holy grail of security, the single pane of glass?
Oh, shut up.
That was the proper response.
I'm in a single pane of glass cage of emotion.
I think I have one here somewhere. I have a single pane of glass. I'll bring it to the next one. So
yeah,
it's like anytime someone promises, it'll be like single pane of glass.
Oh, nice. Just you have a piece of glass there.
I have a prop. Yeah, I have a prop. It was at B-Sides last year. It was amazing.
Prop glass. That's great. Yeah, I mean that's the goal of Chasm is to bring all that data together in one place and be like a system of record for stuff that you can search in for stuff. But yeah, I mean a lot of things should just be a query in a database, right? It doesn't need to be. It's less a single pane of glass and more like a single query, right?
Well, I just read that post and then some of the other follow-up posts. It seems very promising and it makes a lot of sense. Like you already have this EDR that has deep integration, so why not use that data? So it's interesting, and from a day-to-day point of view, like getting like vulnerability management is like a whack-a-mole exercise, and like please get us out of this.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah. Jackie, what do you want to cover?
We had a handful of things. I think that I had just mentioned some kind of additional things toward the end because I had seen them. And I'm sure you love it when I do this to you, when you're like trying to get ready for the show and like 15 minutes before. I'm like, hey, guess what? There are like 9 other things that we should cover because...
Which we'll never cover because we already run over time all the time.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. We're in a really important kind of pass the torch era. There's a lot of kind of old guard of cybersecurity, the kind of older Gen X and younger baby boomers who are getting ready to retire and move on. And so there's just little things, or, they get freaked out that it's the apocalypse and they decide to retire. Not that has anything to do with this, but I just thought it was worth pointing out that Dave Luber, who's been at the NSA for almost 40 years, he was the cyber director. He's retiring at the end of the month. NSA's kind of undergone quite a few shakeups over the last few months since the change of administration and is already hurting from a talent perspective. So I don't think that that's going to get any better. And then in the same vein, Cisco also announced a handful of different shakeups to its executive team. So Mark Patterson is going to become the CFO. Scott Herron's retiring. And then Jitu Patel is actually going to President and Chief Product Officer. So they're not necessarily things any of us probably have deep thoughts on, but I thought it was worth noting that I think this is probably a trend that's going to continue. And I imagine that the makeup of leadership teams, both in enterprise and in government, is going to change dramatically over the next several years. And I wonder how that's going to impact things like tribal knowledge and, and all of those sorts of things. It's not getting any easier to work in cybersecurity. And if you can afford to retire right now, I probably fucking would.
Yeah. A lot of people taking that early retirement. Yeah. So one of my questions here, Eamon, I'll try and force an update on the website there. The stuff I added to PP Works a couple minutes ago might not be there, but yeah, I wonder just in general, the workforce, right? Is baby boomers are all retiring now? So that is I think I haven't actually looked at the different ages of the workforce, at least in the US. So I don't know if that's a significant chunk in that, like maybe we do have a bit of a hole, but I think easily you can say as Gen X kind of rises into those roles, I would expect it to change things. I don't know how much Gen X has consistently pushed back on the way baby boomers do stuff and think about things. Or if they've absorbed it, but I guess we'll find out. It's a good point though.
Well, even more so millennials, like the oldest millennials turn 45 next year. So I think millennials are significantly older than people think they are. And that's kind of, you've got this big lump of young baby boomers who extended retirement. One, because Social Security, the age for retirement for Social Security was changed, and the housing crisis. And so a lot of them are still trying to recover from that. And then older Gen X, they had both the housing crisis and then COVID wiped out some savings. So yeah, it's a really interesting time to be alive in general. 65% of money in the enterprise will be held by people under 45 within the next couple years. So yeah, just the things are going to get different.
I wonder
how much longer we'll have to wear collared shirts.
I wonder, though, I mean, thinking about this with security in particular, you've got a
business casual.
Yeah. A fairly young field that's heavy on people knowing stuff and having experience. And now you're having the folks who were at the beginnings of it, now starting to retire. What is that going to look like when we start losing that knowledge and experience? How will that shift things? How much has people absorbed the people behind them absorbed as they've come along?
Yeah. I was actually commenting on LinkedIn yesterday. I was commenting on LinkedIn yesterday. I noticed that something I've noticed just in conversations with security leaders, that a lot of them don't have this kind of technical background that some of us had, because we came through IT and we understand ports and protocols and how computers work at some fairly basic levels. Like not the theory of how computers work, but actually how computers work, right? And that's just been abstracted, so many times over the years. Cloud, SaaS, we're further and further from the silicon and understanding how things work under the covers. And I've noticed that leads to some assumptions about how things work. Like even, I've talked about this in previous episodes. Somewhere along the way in the last 3 years, AV and EDR became the same thing, and they're just not. Like from a SKU perspective, like maybe you buy them in a bundle, but they are different processes running on your system. They're different code bases, and they're kept separate for good reason, right? Like maybe a POS can't handle EDR, but I do want next-gen AV on there, so you can install one and not the other. And even if you look at like the lowest cost Falcon offering has no EDR, built into it. It's just AV, right? And, but more and more I see people, like when they say EDR, oftentimes they mean antivirus,
AV.
right? They're actually talking about the malware protection and detection component of it, not the endpoint information gathering and doing detection off of that. So that kind of concerns me. I feel like we're losing some knowledge and some context as
I think that can be both a good and a bad thing. I feel like maybe people have stayed in tech and security for too long, so there's more tolerance for 25-year-old servers and Windows freaking Vista and all of that kind of bullshit, because we do have people who still know how to work on them and can fix them. So maybe when we get to the point that there just is nobody left who knows why this thing was put in the first place or can still deal with it, like, because that's one of the crazy things is it's like, I guess one of the other stories we were going to talk about was the FAA and the fact that they can't manage their stupid data pipelines either. But yeah, one of the crazy things in security is there's such a high tolerance for legacy technology and this like, oh, just integrate it and make it work versus like, no, we really need to replace it. So I don't know, maybe that'll provide some incentive to people to actually move forward. But
so what I'm hearing, Jackie, is you need people to die so we can get rid of tech debt, right?
Yes. If the only way to get rid of tech debt is to kill off the person in the room who thinks that COBOL is still acceptable, let's
hurry up and die, sysadmins.
Yeah. You and your
I'm feeling
Unix
attacked
can go
by
to
that
hell.
statement there. I was a sysadmin. Jeez.
Wow.
I'm sorry, but
No, he's the one that said kill off the sysadmins. You didn't. You said COBOL. I was like, I'm safe.
Yeah. No, but I do think there's a certain level of like, just because there are people at Jiffy Lube who can work on a 64 Camaro doesn't mean they don't understand why all vehicles should have airbags now. You know what I mean?
There's
and
still
like,
some. Yeah. I feel like part of that is there's pride in it, right? There is some pride in, keeping an old thing running, both from a practical perspective, not having to buy the new thing, but also just the principle of it, just the fact that it was built really well, or, maybe because of your skill, you're 3D printing new parts for it or something like that, or, you found a power supply on eBay that works and the thing is still running.
So I feel about my body now.
But it's a good point,
I'm taking
Jackie.
pride in that it hasn't fallen apart yet.
Well, we'll be able to 3D print parts for that too in the near future, I think.
I have one in my knee. I have a ACL that was like my stem cells and a piece of cow marrow that helped my ACL regrow. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is the future right there. Love it. Eamon, what do you want to cover?
Well, there's
coming
two articles. There's two that draw my attention. Obviously, the one that I mentioned about AI interviewing, and then the VC one was fascinating. The hot take about venture capital. I guess we could talk about the end, but
well, cover yours first. Let's do let's hear interviewer rant here. Eamon as the interviewer.
Yeah. So I interview, as part of my progression as a fractional CISO is when the company's graduating, we have a full-time person, then we start building out their staff, right? So I've been interviewing a lot.
Find your own replacement, right?
Yeah. I'm like the A-team. I come in, do the thing, and then I'm out. So
do things explode? Because in the A-team, that's all I remember is a lot of things exploding.
No explosion, but I do drive a van. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have No, I've been watching A-Team lately on
BA Baracus.
BA Baracus. Don't touch my van, fool.
Yeah, the last thing weird security people need is to be driving vans.
A black van with red rims. No. Not especially me. I don't need to be doing that. So
even I would look pretty sus in a van.
Yeah. It makes everyone look sus.
Anyway, but no, so we've been interviewing a lot. I've been interviewing a lot this week. I love interviewing. I love putting together the job descriptions, but the interview, like asking interesting questions and stuff like that. I started building a bank. But anyway, I don't know, man. Like, and I'm always looking for people like before typing and like searching. Oh, hold on, and I'm suspecting. I was suspecting that some AI is in play. In fact, someone showed me during RSA. There's some AI recording tools that don't let you know you're being recorded, and it will give you feedback real time. So why not? Of course, it's going to be utilized for AI for interviews too, and you could hear the responses. Like this, like sounds like a canned response. I'm like, this is not a natural response. And you're looking at the eye movements and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it really bothers me. My favorite answer though is when someone says, "I don't know," and they just say, "You know what? I don't know this," and like that shows me courage. That shows me they're willing to be honest and upfront instead of try to like finagle and weave and hold on, I'm having a headache, and while I type out the answer. Anyway, so
That makes me feel better because yesterday I told a group of like college sophomores and freshmen that if you don't know something in an interview, just say, "I'm not familiar with that." Is there a concept that you're looking for that I may have relevant experience to, or explain? But like, can you imagine if they hired you to work in their SOC and you were triaging a critical incident and you didn't know the answer to something, and instead of just saying you don't know, you tried to bullshit? Like that's what they're trying to ascertain is, can they trust you to know the limits of your own knowledge and ask for help when you need it? Because in this critical situation, that's if somebody has too much ego to say I don't know, that's a non-starter for most security teams.
I feel like it's pushing culture in the wrong direction too. This is the same culture where you can't tell your boss that you're looking for a new job because you're not happy, right? Like this hiding stuff from your boss. Like okay, like if AI makes you a better employee, if Google searches make you a better employee, just be upfront about it. And what a horrible start to the job is. You don't even have the job yet, and you're already like lying, sneaking around,
yeah.
It's not a way to start the relationship.
Well, and taking shortcuts, and that just says you have you don't have drive. And I was talking to one of my children about this yesterday. I was like, nobody can instill in you the desire to compete with yourself. And like, if you just look at school or a job interview as like work where you have to check the box and get through it, you're never going to do better than average, because you have to have that thing in you where you make it a game where you want to do as best as you can. And where using something like that AI would feel so gross because it was like cheating. Like, and I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, because it's not the use of AI that drives me nuts. It's the like, I didn't look at the answer, like digest it and then come back with something. I don't know. It's just lazy.
One of the things I wonder, maybe to shift the focus a little bit with the interview process. I agree with you, Jackie. The idea of, hey, it's okay to say, I don't know about this. We push beyond. But how many of us have been through interviews where we're it's really clear we're playing the game of stump the chump. And you have to know. And if you don't know all of these ridiculous details about things, you're like, I've been asked questions in interviews where you're like, I don't know and I don't care. If I needed to know that bit of trivia, I'll go look up the trivia.
Well,
but the pressure is I've got to respond right now with the trivia pursuit question. And Eamon, I understand you're talking about the perspective of interviewing somebody. But I don't know. You got this pressure where it's hard to say I don't know. At the same time, that's the right answer. And you should say that.
So there's 2 points. So one, regarding the I don't know, like the best answer is I don't know, but like either, I could try to make up or I could try to guess,
but I
or
can
whatever.
Find out.
Here's how I can figure this out. Yeah.
Or here's what I would do. Here's what I would do to like, whatever. Perfect. I want to know because what you're trying to assess is like how well they can think and stuff. But back to like the basic trivia questions. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm repeating things that were done to me. Like, but there's some things that are important. Like, I think I'm trying to understand when I'm talking to someone. I need the baseline to see where are we going here. where are your strengths or your weaknesses, right? Yes, there's some things that are trivia. Like I used to get asked all the time, tell me about the 3-way handshake. And in the beginning, I'm like, I don't know, but it came up in every single interview. And it's like, man, I studied this a long time ago. But I did get it because like, hey, listen, you need to know like sin, act, right? Like it's like just know it. Because if you don't know it, you don't know the fundamentals of networking, hypothetically or presumably.
Wireshark's got you, man. You're good.
I know. Well, like one time I got the
know.
job because I knew a cryptography question about like a specific like CBC chaining or whatever it is. Like
it's a terrible reason to hire someone. No offense.
I don't know, but like I studied, like you need to. Yeah, I don't know. You're right. I mean,
there are some things we need to know. I agree with you. Like that are core. Yes, they're kind of trivial. Now, when I say trivia, like the question that comes to my mind, one of the interview questions I ran across was, what section of the man page is this command found?
Wow.
And you're like, what the heck is that?
Dude.
Like, how much are you mad at your dad?
Yeah. I mean, what are you
memorizing man pages? Yeah.
And then there was another one I saw, like, we just want to see how far we can push them until they fall apart. Was the subtext in it. And you're just like, no.
I can guess where one of those companies is based.
So there was a Hacker Jeopardy a couple years ago, and I did find this pretty shocking that nobody playing Hacker Jeopardy, they were all in their 20s. From what I heard, I wasn't actually there. But nobody knew, I think it was port 21, TCP port 21, like what's on there by default. And that was kind of shocking to me. And at the same time, I was like, okay, sure, that makes sense. Like nobody uses it anymore. Like you have to be a certain age to know that. And,
I used to know what channel on the scanner, police, fire, weather service, all those things were. Yeah. I probably don't need to know that anymore. No, I understand your point. I don't know if you saw, but Marcus Hutchins was going off the last couple days because people were literally telling him that you didn't need TLS. They don't understand the difference between HTTP and HTTPS. And it's crazy. And I think it depends on what you're hiring someone for, right? Like if you're being hired to be a web designer, you probably don't need to know what TLS is. But I think to Eamon's point, like either those people were actually using just verbatim AI BS, or they had so over rehearsed with some type of AI like interview coach and like rehearsed the answers that it came across as 100% BS. Yeah. But either way, like all I really like, and maybe I think this is how I got hired in security with literally zero security knowledge, is with most of us are some version of autistic/ADHD. And all you really want to know is that the person knows how to weaponize that, and then they know how to point it in a direction when it's weaponized. So whenever someone asks me a question on something I don't know, and this is what I told these college kids, I'm like, think about the times that you've gone down an insane rabbit hole on something and gone from knowing zero about it to being an expert in like 18 hours, and tell them about that in an interview. Because even if it's some weird anime series, be like, one of my strengths is that I can hyper focus on things and learn a lot of information in a short period of time like this. So while I'm not familiar with ZTNA, I can probably get there within a couple days, because once I start on something, I can't stop until I know everything, right? And I think that's really what you're looking for, is not the best answer to your question, is what skills does a person have where I'm not going to have to hold their hand every time they need to learn something new.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not that anybody was here for an lesson in how to interview, but if anybody was, there you go.
So, Eamon, how easy is it to spot? And how common is it in your experience so far?
Should I give away my toolkit? Like, oh, I don't.
No, you should.
Could it be useful? Like that's up to you.
Whatever. I'll say it. So basically, I'm looking for eye movements, right? When I ask a question, I'm looking for experiential feedback. So a lot of times
somebody telling a story about a time right?
Exactly. And that's how you can get them, is because tell me about an instance when whatever, and what they say, oh, this is how I go about. No. Tell me about a specific example in your experience of how you did this. And then it fails. It gets them all the time. So And
which is a good interview question, by the way, to talk about. Tell me the experience. I like that.
Yeah. I try
It's
to
a
mix
conversation here at this point, back and forth.
I try to mix
figure out
it.
what we're doing.
Even my first question, which I won't give away here, is my favorite, and everybody's like, "Wow!" And it gets everybody stumped. It's like an icebreaker thing. But yeah, things I look for also eye movements, right? Pauses, long pauses. That's like total telltale. And then now that I took my database, just last night, I took my database of questions and put it into Notion. And I love Notion's AI thing where it auto generates your fields. And I say, answer this question. And so I'll see what like, okay, here's what most likely answer.
It probably varies per model, but you can get a good idea probably of how an LLM would answer. Yeah.
Exactly. So kind of like,
and you can interact with them with your voice now. So they don't even need to be typing your questions into something. I can just activate Gemini on my phone.
Well, that's how they're working.
Next to my laptop, and it'll just, keep talking to Eamon like he's me.
That's the tools they're using. So like the ones that are typing it, I'm like, oh, you haven't seen the new AI tools where you could just like, it'll just monitor your conversation. So even for like using AI tools, you're typing still. Why are you typing still? So
you should just ask them what their favorite generative AI tool is, and if they go completely white.
Yeah. That'll be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, just elephant in the room right up front.
Yeah.
And which of those are you using right now?
Yeah.
Or you should say something that sounds innocuous, like, so what generative AI tools are you using right now? And that could just mean right now in life in general, but if they freak out or look nervous.
Doesn't mean for the interview call, right? But they might interpret it that way. But that's on them. Yeah. And it's a valid question, right? Like we talked about some businesses last week that are actually requiring users to use AI to be more productive, or they could get let go. They could be lose their jobs.
Yeah, I expect you to use AI even in an on-site interview. You're welcome to use any tools available to you, because that's life, right? How many of us half of our lives is Googling something and finding out? I mean, come on, that's the reality of tech.
People who aren't writing code don't know about Stack Overflow. I found this out, that people really don't know that all developers and coders do is just copy shit off of Google all day.
Yeah. Totally. There's a great meme about that. I've got saved somewhere in my hard drive, but I'm gonna speed run through a few items here so that we don't end this too much over what we aimed for. But OneDrive has a new feature where it's going to actually prompt people to put their personal stuff with their work stuff instead of keeping it separate. I have no idea where this idea came from. Probably AI. But it just seems like a terrible idea. I remember years ago, I had to be very careful installing Dropbox on machines because sometimes I would forget that I used to curate and analyze malware, and like the AV will completely go nuts as it starts syncing my Dropbox. So I do not want people's personal files being pulled into our corporate OneDrive. That seems like a terrible idea.
Wait, and this is by default too? What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It actually prompts them to do it. And if they say yes, it does
AI for this. Hey, is this a good idea?
The feature is officially titled "Prompt to Add Personal Account to OneDrive Sync."
So is it going to create a personal OneDrive, or what? I mean,
I think it's putting personal stuff in using the corporate space. So,
the article says that
if you're an interior designer searching for nude paint colors for this season, you're going to get some really weird shit in your search results.
The article is focusing on from the business to the personal OneDrive. But to Adrian's point, this goes both ways. Neither do I want somebody's personal data coming up into the business.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a policy you can enable called prevent users from syncing personal OneDrive accounts. and you should enable that.
Yeah.
Disable personal sync. All right. CrowdStrike laid off 500 folks. Microsoft laid off a bunch also. So it just seems like maybe more of a market response, I think, than anything else. Of course, everyone's going, oh, they're getting replaced by AI. But, it's if you look at how often large companies lay off people, there's a cycle to it. So I would guess more market than AI.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great essay. Where is this essay? Futurism. Company regrets replacing all those pesky human workers with AI, just wants its humans back, is the title of this by Joe Wilkins. And this was Klarna. We mentioned it earlier. Interesting read. They talk about some of the reasons, but this could kind of trigger a shift in the market, and it'll be interesting to see if that shifts a pop in the AI bubble more quickly. Because once one company announces they're doing it, at least 10 times that we'll do it without making any kind of announcement. So we'll see.
It's safe. We're not the only ones doing it. We can do it too.
Right. Yeah, they went ahead and said the thing out loud, so it's okay for us to do it too without being scandalized.
Worth following up along that sign is along that article is the AI, the CMU experiment that they staffed a whole bunch, a company filled with AI agents and called the agent company to see what would happen. It's very interesting. I'm taking a look at that.
Oh yeah, is that mentioned in the article?
Yeah. You click the laughably bad link, it'll take you to another article where it's an experiment by CMU researchers.
I think the thing I remember is they could do the AI stuff could do the work 24% of the time.
You'll never guess what had happened. I bet I would guess what happened.
That's pretty good for a Dunkin's. Like if I get my coffee right 24% of the time at Dunkin's, it's a pretty good day.
Oh my God. I've got some stories about Dunkin' too. I think it was a solid 50% of the time there was something wrong with our order. Like I remember I got a breakfast sandwich with just ham and cheese, no egg. I'm like, now it's a lunch sandwich. It's not even breakfast anymore without the egg.
Yeah. I lived on Dunkin's during the pandemic because there was one around the corner to my house that I could just, mobile order to. And there's a really funny SNL skit with Casey Affleck, I'm pretty sure, about Dunkin's, where it is 100% the Dunkin's vibe of like, you don't like it? Get out of here.
Yeah.
It's a Boston place.
Yeah. All
like
right.
the other one on the VC capital is done. VC is screwed. I think the only reason that I side on the yes where it probably is because there's no IPO market. So I think what's kept VCs alive through previous bubbles is that they could shift all those losses to the public markets. We haven't seen, especially like in security. AI we may see different, but the IPO market dried up, right after the pandemic, and it just has not come back. And it'll be interesting to see how they offload those losses, whether it's to the hyperscalers or what.
Yeah, they made a mess with SPACs also. That was an awful trend that was mostly championed by VCs. And that's why I say I kind of believe it when I see it, because I thought SPACs were pretty bad. But people keep giving them money. So, until the LPs stop giving them money, I don't know if I'm going to believe that they're screwed.
But I do get the premise. I do get the premise that it's kind of like playing musical chairs, and everybody keeps putting money in because there was a whole bunch of money left on the table. But once the music stops, what's going to happen? That's it's a very interesting article.
Well, where did they put their money? Where these LPs put their money? If not in VC funds anymore, that's also a question that needs an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Not in real estate, not in funds. Yeah, it's
So number 7, two things I labeled dumpster fires here. One was CISA killing off RSS feeds for Kevs and cyber alerts, which a bunch of people complained. It came back. And this keeps happening. I just, I don't know. It's just makes all this stuff just seem unreliable. I don't even know who would have made that decision or why they made that decision. They've got to know how many other processes and products out there depend on that RSS feed. I mean, sure, there's RSS is not the only way that you can pull that data, but yeah, we need a way to manage it automatically. The other dumpster fire is MCP, and we've been saying MCP is going to be a dumpster fire. This is some actual analysis of why it's going to be a dumpster fire and specific things that are dumpster fiery. So what is this? blog.jasail.dev. MCP may cause pwnage, backdoors in disguise. And they just went through a bunch of MCP stuff. And, so some evidence there on what's going on. And the TLDR is it's back to like early 2000s, late 90s type mistakes. We see this over and over again. We saw this with DevOps tools. We saw this with cloud tools. Just developers not familiar with the trials and tribulations of previous generations are doomed to repeat those mistakes and learn the hard way. There were some NPM packages that were just social engineering as something useful you could use with Cursor and had backdoors in them, stole credentials. So it's not even typo squatting. It's just squatting, I guess. And a bunch of people downloaded them. And there's also a legit NPM library compromised. And it's just NPM continues to be, I think, the most popular repo for attackers to try and get some, at least a few people, catch a few people out. It's a good watering hole to attack. And then that brings us to our squirrel stories. Very kind of excited about right to repair stuff. This is a little underwhelming, but it's kind of cool that Philips is officially putting out 3D printable components for one of their electric razors. Nice. So it says to repair products, but this is less of a repair and more of a you can take this, you can customize your own attachments and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. But I mean, people are doing that anyway. They don't really need the vendor to put out official ones. But I do kind of like this trend. Like I would like more companies to publish blueprints and part lists and stuff like that. Especially now that so many of us have 3D printers now. And we have 3D printers that I would feel okay telling non-technical people to go out and buy, like Bamboo 3D printers. I haven't had to do anything to mine. Like really? I install the app. Like sometimes before getting out of bed, I'm like, I want to find something to print, and I hit print, and it's done by the time I'm down there with my coffee. And I've printed some pretty useful stuff with it. It's pretty cool.
That's cool. I mean, I need this. Go ahead.
It's more reliable than our paper printers.
That's fascinating. I mean, back to the article. I need this right now. There's a Hot Wheels piece missing, and my son's like set, and I'm trying to find the piece, and I can't even find the one piece that's missing, and I just want to recreate it. It's so small, but it's integral to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
super
I feel
easy. The 3D scanners are cheap. The printers are cheap. Yeah. It's really easy to do.
You can use your phone as a 3D scanner. That's something I haven't tried yet. I do want to try that.
I don't have the original part.
Like 100 something on the scanner because it was cheap enough, but
yeah, that's as long as it's a phone that has some depth perception. So like I know the iPhone can do it. I don't. Maybe certain Androids can do it, but you need kind of that the infrared or LiDAR piece of it. I forget how it does the depth perception. And the last squirrel story is that a science experiment detected the conversion of lead into gold. So alchemy is real.
But to be
That's what we're
clear,
ending on today.
you don't get very much gold.
No, it's a very academic, sciencey type thing. So it's not something that people are going to be doing in their basement, with old lead bars or anything like that. But
if you try hard enough, your hair and teeth will start falling out. So that's the good news.
Yeah.
They said they created 86 billion gold nuclei, which was 29 picograms of gold, which you would need trillions more of that to create a piece of jewelry. So there you are.
Oh, and they only use 800 megawatts to do that. So.
Oh yeah, never mind the electricity and the fact you need to collider to do it.
You have to learn entirely new units of measurement to understand this article. But anyway, I still thought that was fun. That was one of my partner's kids sent that in one of our group chats and says, alchemy is real. And I was like, this is great. We got to have this on the show.
Love it.
Made me happy. All right. And with that, thank you all for joining me today. Eamon, Jackie, Jason, this has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, good time.
Really enjoyed the news today. A lot of fun stuff, and I think some really useful stuff, especially with the. I was on the fence about discussing the AI and interviews thing, but I think that's probably one of the most valuable things we talked about today. So I'm glad we did it.
It's relevant. Thanks to my friend for posting it, because it was going through my head, but I'm like, it's one of those things like, am I crazy or is this happening? And looks like it's a thing.
Yeah. All right. What do we have going on next week? We've got Eric Block on to talk about the state of AI SOC automation. So we've had a lot of interviews on this, but I'm particularly excited about this one because Eric Block has actually built a bunch of SOCs. That's kind of what he does. And he went around the show floor at RSA and talked to different companies trying to automate away different levels of the SOC. Or maybe augment them. So I'm really interested in his takes on how that's going in the industry. So that's going to be a really good one. I'm really excited about that one. We're going to have that conversation next week, and then a new segment like today with I think a few RSA executive interviews following. So don't miss that one next week, and stay tuned. Next up, we've got 2 videos from the 2025 RSAC conference. And big thanks to everybody watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. See you next week. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind by visiting securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today.
Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the Cyberist TV studio and broadcast alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and joining me for this interview is Bree Frost, Director, Security and IT Ops Curriculum at PluralSight. Welcome, Bree.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm very, very glad that you are here, and I'm actually incredibly intrigued to hear your take on what are the emerging AI threats, because you're coming at it more from an education and curriculum side and actually looking at what are you seeing in the industry and what needs to be done. So where's your focus? What are you looking at for emerging?
Yeah, I have definitely done some research in the last couple of years looking at how attackers are utilizing this technology. And it's interesting, I always go back to historically, all the way back to the Middle Ages of security becomes an attacker breaches some type of security control, and then defenders have to catch up by improving that defense, right? And so right now we're at an era with this new AI technology where attackers are utilizing it. It is supercharging exploit development, and attackers are utilizing it to increase their attacks at scale with efficiency. And defenders are kind of scrambling to catch up. And I think we'll get there. But right now, I think offensive security is definitely reaping the most benefits in that threat landscape.
Oh, absolutely. Now, it brought to mind something that was in the news last week about AI being able to create a fully functional exploit from a new vulnerability. So we are there. Like, that's not constant, but it is happening already. And I am very intrigued because you have an AI skills report that PluralSight has put together. We were talking briefly before coming on camera, and I am thinking right now, as we realize AI-assisted defense and AI-assisted offense and bad actors, we're all at this beginning point, and the people who are tasked with securing, defending, remediating, it's kind of similar to what I imagine it was like whenever, in the late 80s or early 90s, where the IT person became whoever had typed in their life on a computer.
Yes.
Okay, so we are kind of in a similar thing. No, and that's not the fault of any particular practitioner, but there were some very interesting statistics from your report on how well are the practitioners actually ready to handle the emerging AI threats?
Yeah, I think we're seeing this technology increase at a speed and scale that we've never seen. I think it is increasing faster than education and training can keep up. And so I think it creates kind of that, I know we're talking about that statistic that says like 79% of security professionals overestimate their knowledge of AI, which is terrifying as a statistic in and of itself. But when you think about it, if I say today I have 100% of knowledge on one particular topic in AI, in a week, that topic changes. Like, it evolves, it escalates, sure. It changes at speed. Right. And so how do you calculate keeping up with all of that technology as quickly as it's changing? And so it is twofold. I will say, as security professionals, we were talking about like how daunting everything seems right now. Is we already feel like we get alert fatigue and new vulnerabilities and new exploits that are coming out daily, it seems. Now you add kind of that layer of AI on top of it. It makes sense that, we're all trying to boast where we are, but in security, you have to be really careful because overestimating your knowledge and your skill set gets dangerous because it immediately opens us up to vulnerabilities. So I think in the industry, we need to be a little bit more honest about, I don't know this, I need time to dig into it and not try to move immediately as quickly as, yes, I know how to do it. Yes, I know how to secure this system. If you don't, that's dangerous. And so we need to be careful about understanding with this understanding that this technology is increasing too quickly and that we're all kind of in the same boat together.
Now, is there a disconnect that you're seeing between upper management and executives being able to understand really what it would take for the individual human to be able to learn and keep up?
Yeah, I think at like even an IC level, an individual contributor level working on security, you have one level of specific expertise. And as that gets higher to a manager, director, VP, executive level, all the things that you have to be expected to be an expert on, it expands, right? And so I understand why it says executives are feeling more pressure to be experts on every single topic under that umbrella. I just don't think that is an acceptable, we shouldn't have that expectation.
And when you are speaking with individuals now, coming from your background with, offensive security, right? Mm-hmm. You did offensive security in the past. Yeah. It was your focus. And if you were jumping into that field today, say I had just graduated college or just done some preparatory boot camp or something, and you jumped in today, can you give me how would that differ from whenever you entered?
Yeah. I think AI is here to stay.
Right.
And I think it has just It's expanded the threat landscape. So, but it also helps us as a tool, right? So it helps us identify what areas we need to focus on and prioritize, but the underlying technology of how AI, ML, all of that works is going to be just as critical to learn today as ports, protocols, operating systems was back in the day when I first picked up, right? I have a traditional IT background,
Okay.
and we're seeing a lot of cybersecurity professionals kind of jumping into the field without that like baseline of inherent implied knowledge on how all of that works. And so it's just kind of caused almost like a snowball effect of like, there's so much inherent knowledge, and now we're adding all the technology needed to identify like the artifacts that AI leaves behind to be able to do effective detections. And so just tack on all the fundamentals of how AI technology works. And I think that's probably where we need to start from offensive security professionals learning today, is starting with emulation, starting with AI, and then also, you know, all that long list of implied technology.
And so what is your recommendation for organizations that are realizing understanding AI and its implications has to become a priority more quickly? Is there a defined roadmap or procedures or anything that you would recommend for organizations facing that training gap?
Yeah, I think from a like a curriculum perspective and a training is curating your processes and your training for that audience is so critical. Like, you have to have something for your entire organization of users. Like, if I'm going to do a security training for your accountants, for your HR reps, for your marketing and sales people, that has to be curated differently on how it's going to be relevant to them and their role and their day-to-day versus your security team, versus your IT team. All of those audiences have different needs, have different interests. And I think we all hear cyber. I truly believe that, you know, my biased opinion is that cybersecurity does need to be a top of mind and a mindset for every organization and all roles within that organization. But you're going to get more effectiveness from your people wanting to learn about cybersecurity. And then on top of that, using secure actions if you curate your training to them.
Excellent. So as we were talking about, being here at RSAC, looking at the audience, looking at the amount of information we're all being given, and as we individually are interfacing with AI agents consistently in our daily lives, the inundation of information and our physical limitations take a toll. Yeah. So I could see why having targeted curriculum, not only that's intelligent, but it literally is part of the mainstream of keeping an organization going, because you have to keep burnout down. Yeah. So I am also very encouraged by the fact that in PluralSight's report on AI skills, that security and fraud detection was in the top 5 of the reasons that AI was going to be adopted. To me, I feel like that kind of is an improvement. That means executive leadership is noticing that security and threat detection is priority. Like, this is a huge thing. For that to be in the top 5 of reasons, how do you feel about that? Like, that's the same?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many scary use cases for AI and so many great use cases for AI. And I think kind of similar back to like kind of the first thing I was talking about is like right now we're seeing AI used for exploitative reasons. And I think that immediately triggers kind of executives to focus on security where maybe security wasn't a big focus before. And they're like, it's no longer an acceptable expectation to be proactive with your security measures and processes at all. AI, you can't like hide in just generalized security methods anymore. AI has like changed the name of the game.
And since it has changed the name of the game, can you identify then like 1 to 3 main skills that you think the security professionals need to hone in now?
Yeah, I think when you talk about that, I get a little nervous because when you talk about, you walk the vendor floor here at RSA, my team and I always talk about different buzzwords, right? There's always a different buzzword for every year. You talk about, I think it was zero trust, however many years ago, 5 years ago on the vendor floor at RSA. And this year we're definitely seeing AI-powered attacks. And look at I think you even mentioned AI threat detection. And so the immediate instinct seems to be, let's fight AI with AI. And I don't think that's the most effective method to do it. I think we need to use traditional detection methods and incident response protocols, but tack on kind of those fingerprints, and by learning how AI technologies work, those artifacts and those fingerprints that they leave behind is going to help us increase those detections. And so I think that's the really important piece here, is it's going to be a culmination of all the things, but just throwing your incident response playbooks out the door and saying, oh, we're going to have a button push that now we're going to do automated red teaming and automated pet testing and automated threat detection because now we don't need to. Yay, AI's done it for us. I don't think that's how it's going to work anymore.
It's not.
And well, all the vendors on the vendor floor are going to come for me because they're trying to sell thousands of dollars in products that do just that. I think we need to be, traditional methods work. Now we have tools that are going to help us get there, and the defenses are going to catch up.
Well, and I've got to say, I'm very encouraged when I see the vendors who literally say, we aren't really using AI other than an assistive thing. When they say, well, no, because we have run the numbers, we have done all of, even whether it's emulations or they're taking data from their live use cases, and they're saying the AI isn't where we want it to be for our willingness to put our name on this.
Yeah.
It's not there. We see and know how to do this, and we are still doing better with traditional standards, and yet still perhaps relieving some burden on the individual practitioner or giving more data analytics to executives or to management and to leadership. But I find that refreshing. And I feel like there's some, here, being with the AIXCC, with the DARPA initiative on the self-patching, autonomous AI that will detect and patch everything on its own completely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. We're also years away from that happening, and I think people assume that that's already here.
Well, and it's who's validating that that's happening? We're putting so much trust into this technology, and let's say we had something like that happen and it patched 5 vulnerabilities down the road, and then we get 10 vulnerabilities down the road, 20 to understand that patching didn't happen accurately or not fully, and now we have to go retroactively go back and do all of that manually, right? And so I think it just needs to be, we need to meet in the middle, right? And something you were saying, so I did a workshop on deepfakes here this week at RSA, and the premise was basically, let's make a deepfake live. Let's make a live capture video live. Same person, same outfit, same script, same sentence. And we used multiple open source deepfake detection tools to see how accurate they were. They're not, none of them that we utilized. But my co-presenter that presented with me wrote kind of a Python script using traditional detection methods, scraping the metadata, looking at the frames per second, the codecs, the bitrate, all of those things, using those traditional detection methods, way more accurate. Immediately, just a simple Python script and something like that. And so it showcases we need to utilize AI as a tool, but we need to use our traditional detection methods to fight this type of technology.
Beautiful. Well, then I'm highly going to recommend that all of our audience look into skills and being able to up-level skills to where they aren't having to fudge. They actually know what the AI is doing and what they can do with it.
Yes, and clearly don't feel intimidated because no one else knows what they're doing either.
Everyone else is in the same boat. Bree, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
To find out more about PluralSight, please visit securityweekly.com/PluralSight RSAC. For all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thank you again, Bree, for the conversation. Thanks, you for
Mandy.
sharing. Welcome back to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the Cyber Risk TV studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and joining me for this interview is Dr. David Aviv, Chief Technology Officer at Radware. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Mandy, for having me.
I am so glad that you are here. And in the few minutes before we started our show here. Fascinating conversation. Yes. I've got to tell you, it's always encouraging to me when I get to speak to a technology officer. And at this conference, I'm curious. You have all that you have been working on with Radware products. You have all that you have been focusing on and looking to create. What have you noticed at the conference that either aligns with what you are doing or is completely opposite of what you are doing?
Well, it's a tough question, but...
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, from what we have seen, obviously there are many sections that we in Radware we are not engaged with, because there are many security domains that different vendors are offering. We at Radware, we are mainly protecting our customers, data centers, service provider networks, for when they expose their assets publicly outside. As far as we know, obviously there's a big hype on the AI applications, protecting AI applications. We do see a lot of concerns about identity, how to protect identity, preserve identity. It has a lot of governance issues as well. And beyond that, the traditional, I would say, the enterprise security solutions, as well as, traditional application security, network security. There's a mix of many things here. As far as I see, we are quite aligned on what's going on in the market space, and we plan our own next generation or next wave of products to cope with the new challenges of the protecting AI apps and AI environments.
And is that, in your view, the main thing that is changing the threat landscape?
I would say that definitely the generative AI hype, or I would say the democratization of AI is changing dramatically. Not only the security posture, our lifestyle, our life posture, quite soon. We start talking a lot of vibe coding.
Right.
So everyone talks on vibe coding. Is vibe coding going to make obsolete the junior engineers? So it has an impact on every part of the industry. And
far beyond the industry, because we're seeing people who have nothing to do with cybersecurity, and in family life, in home life, everything. The adoption of Gen AI and the way that it is, I feel like we're actively seeing kind of a rewiring of culture and mankind's thought process with having this much information available, and also realizing that our human abilities aren't going to keep up with AI abilities.
Yes, well, there is a lot of debate on let's say general AI that will obsolete people as human being, but it's very hard to predict. I'm a very big, can be considered as optimistic. Vis-a-vis the human nature, the way human will handle. But one thing we can say for sure. My lifetime, I've seen already the web revolution. And this is another big revolution, maybe bigger than the web. We don't know yet, but it might be even bigger than that one. It will probably impact every part of our daily life, and we see the early signs of that. And obviously, as a security, as a technology officer, providing and having to address and protect those kind of new challenges, we are now at the race of understanding the new threat landscape. What does it mean? What does it mean for us? How can we craft new wave of products to be aligned? And for that, obviously, we listen very carefully to our big customers.
That's good. I mean, you as an engineer and product overseers, you're looking, of course, you have to have data.
Yes.
And you need it from your customers. And is it, with your background in telecommunications and electrical engineering, is there any aspect that you look at this very start of generative AI being adopted broadly and go, oh, this is just another means of human communication?
Yes. Well, that is, it takes us back to our previous session before, but this is evolution and revolution. Evolution in the sense the way we communicate and we can create new things, but a revolution in the technology side, the way we can adapt new things and the way it can lead the usage, the new way of using neural networks in order to solve problems, to understand problems. This is going to bring us to completely different areas. I would like to give you a very simple example.
Yeah, please do.
In security, we tend to model threats, and by modeling the threats, we get to understand what kind of models we need to build in order to outpace them. So there were a couple of problems, very tough problems, like business logic attacks for someone that is building protection for APIs. That traditionally, if you use traditional machine learning methods, well, you can do as much as you can, but you cannot go deeper than that because of the limitation of the CPU and memory. Well, guess what? With the new generative AI technology that we already have, it's much easier to model a much complicated model that can now uncover threats that we couldn't even see before. We couldn't understand before.
True.
It's like a chess game. You can play two moves all the time. And now with the new chess, I can see ahead 10 moves at a time.
So that makes me think, if we go back to a simplistic view of an adversary mindset versus the defense mindset, is what you're saying that generative AI is allowing defense to more quickly adapt to how adversaries are creating the evolution of the modern threat landscape?
Absolutely, if you know how to use it.
Okay.
It's like, it's the traditional, you need AI to combat AI.
Well, then how is Radware using it?
So we use it we use 3 layers of that.
Okay.
The first one, we call it, it's secure by AI, which means we use the AI in order to build deeper security controls. So our algorithms become better by simply using AI. What does it mean? It means that we can now solve problems, uncover threats that we couldn't be uncovered before, couldn't understand before, simply by using new technologies, new generative AI technologies, in which we augment our current solutions. So this is the first layer.
Okay.
The second one is protect the AI infrastructure.
Okay.
Our customers start to use AI applications. Well, using AI applications brings up new threat surfaces.
Well, and doesn't it also increase old threats? I mean, it is increased what is been around forever.
Absolutely, amplifies many things.
Right.
Adds many things. I'll give an example. If you run an AI and a regular application, we were used to the supply chain, the ecosystem, and there were many attacks through that supply chain. Now, when you start running AI up, you have a completely new AI supply chain. It's a different thing. It's a different beast. So, how do we address it? How you discover AI assets. We were
Right.
used to talk on shadow IT. Now we are talking on shadow
AI, exactly.
There are many new AI assets in the enterprise. Well, there's a new task. Discovery of them, label them, map the risk of them, safeguard them. So it's an endless list that we are now just addressing and starting to view and understand. And based on that, start to build solutions for them.
And with your triple layer AI assisted technologies within Radware, what is something that the security team or a SOC analyst would see while using Radware? What is a benefit that they would see? What would directly help them?
There will be two. I will speak in two dimensions. The first dimension is you will have better tool to remediate
Okay.
the problem.
Okay.
To bring the RCA to shorten the mean time to repair, to remediate, and find the root cause analysis via new tools I'll give you an example. Today in our traditional SOC, some events, some SIEs, some critical events will bring up the experts to deal and spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours in order to resolve the issue. However, with our new agents, we bring up the new agents for remediation. It cuts down the MTTR, the mean time to repair, 2 minutes.
Oh, wow.
2-3 hours to a couple of minutes. So that's one dimension. Being able, what we call it, anti-fragile network. Moving to an anti-fragile network. Not yes.
Okay. So anti-fragile, that's a really good turn of phrase. That is...
Nassim Taleb, this is not mine. This was phrased by Nassim Taleb.
Oh, okay.
So what we mean, and we adopted that term, is that resiliency can absorb the shock, but stays the same.
So
Anti-fragile networks absorb the shock and changes.
and adjust.
It changes to cope with that and plan for the next one. It means that the new SOC will have new intelligence capabilities to understand the attack and then predict, move to a proactive and a predictive mode in which we'll be able to anticipate for the next wave, make it better, remediate it better.
Now, that is fascinating. It's making me think of a lot of different things, but I am curious, do you feel that with the advances adversarial AI use is bringing that the industry as a whole, or perhaps subsections, are on the verge of a black swan event?
Well, it's depends of the viewpoint, which kind of industries will evolve on that. But it's going to take an extreme impact on all of us. I must be frankly with you. Let's say a year and a half ago when we started the journey on generative AI, I wasn't that sure that the impact will be that big.
Really?
I wasn't.
You mean in the end results for your customers, or?
No, generally, what can be really achieved with those kind of things. But as the month by month, with the new capabilities and I would say the new ecosystem that's been developed around it and the speed of that, I personally was quite amazed on what can be achieved utilizing those kind of new tools.
Can you provide an example?
Yeah, it's like, give an example. One of our customers, big customers, e-commerce, came to us, told us, you guys, you provide us an anti-bot solution for detecting scrapers, our business model is based on those, detecting those bad scrapers and avoid them. Otherwise, we expose our catalog and everything.
Right.
But you, as well as the entire industry, provide a solution which is based on providing suspicious guys, suspicious actors, a challenge. And you expect the actor to solve the challenge in order to be sure if he's a friend or a fool. I mean, is a good guy or a bad guy,
right.
Human or machine. That's a different ways to deal with it. But we start seeing a new wave of agentic bot agents, AI agents, that when we send them the challenge, which is a JavaScript challenge, the agent sends it to a LLM engine, large language model engine. Large language model engine is able very fast to understand the challenge
Absolutely.
and solve it.
Right.
So they can scrape our entire catalog. We're in big trouble.
Oh, yes.
So this is a way where you can see the adversaries are using those kind of new technology, new agents, to defeat the defenses. So our job now is to bring new tools that are defeating those agents that try to defeat the defenses.
But in that moment, when you realize that that is going on, I mean, that's a complete, almost, I feel like a watershed moment. Like, it just makes you stop and go, oh, we have just entered whole new territory.
Yes, a new paradigm. Absolutely. It's a new paradigm.
Yes.
It's a new paradigm of everything. And that's why being able to understand, to run, to test, to understand the new technology, and then be able to understand the new risks that can come through that.
Going back to what you said,
us-
that's like
yes.
4D chess, having to stay ahead of all of that, which is incredibly satisfying for those of us who want to do that and understand the mission toward it. And David, I appreciate your conversation here with us today, and I definitely want to encourage our audience and all of the CISOs to look into Radware's information, because these are key factors for the changing threat landscape and for the next, I mean, we're here. The future is here. It is now. And thank you for joining us. To find out more about Radware, please visit securityweekly.com/Radware RSAC. For all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thank you again, David.
Thank you for having me.